I hit the lottery for millions and chose not to tell a soul. I asked my family for help as a test. Only one person extended a helping hand. My heart pounded as I stared at those 6 winning numbers, $47 million. But instead of screaming with joy, a chilling thought crossed my mind. I had to keep this a secret. Because my family's history of financial manipulation and emotional debt was so tangled, I needed to know if anyone loved me for me, or just for what I could give them. My name is Cassie, and just a few weeks ago my life was, well, it was painfully ordinary. I was 34, an accountant at a small marketing firm in Portland, scraping by, always worrying about bills. My apartment was nothing special. My 10-year-old Corolla made some questionable noises, and my dreams of travel or further education felt miles away. My life was a constant balancing act, always calculating if I could afford even a dinner out. But my family? That was a whole other level of complicated. My parents, Gregory and Diane, divorced when I was young and both remarried. My dad, Gregory, a high school physics teacher, married Stephanie, who had a taste for the finer things. My mom, Diane, ended up with Warren, a successful businessman who clung to every penny. Then there are my siblings. My younger sister, Lisa, 30, the golden child. Ivy League, married to a surgeon, perfect kids, perfect house. And my older brother, Jason, 36, who, despite being charming, has a knack for bouncing between jobs and relationships, and an even greater knack for borrowing money from family, money that, mysteriously, never seems to find its way back. Even my extended family was a minefield. My Aunt Martha, my mom's younger sister, was the rare gem. An elementary school teacher, living paycheck to paycheck, but always there. She'd show up in her ancient Honda, never complaining. Then there was my dad's older sister, Aunt Heather, who married wealthy and never let us forget it, constantly critiquing my life choices. And her son, my cousin Ryan, who inherited her entitlement but developed a serious gambling problem the family pretended didn't exist. I'd been burned so many times, you guys. When Jason needed $5,000 for rehab 3 years ago, I emptied my modest savings. Later, I found out he never even went. When Lisa needed help with her wedding costs, I put $2,000 on my credit card. She promised to pay me back after the honeymoon. 5 years later? Still waiting. My dad needed a loan for roof repairs after a storm, and I sent what I could. A month later? Photos of him and Stephanie vacationing in Cancun. The only person who knew the full extent of these betrayals was my best friend, Charlotte. We met in college, and she was my rock. A nurse, she understood struggle and never judged my jaded feelings about my family. She kept me from becoming bitter, reminding me that not everyone was out to take advantage of me. At work, it wasn't much better. My boss, Arnold, was a credit-stealing pro. My colleague, Derek, was a master at slacking off and still getting recognition. Despite feeling completely underappreciated, I just kept my head down, hoping someday, somehow, it would pay off. Buying lottery tickets was my one small indulgence. Every Friday, $10 at the corner store. My mom called it an attack on people who can't do math. My brother joked I should just give him the money directly. My dad lectured me on probability. But those tickets? They held a tiny spark of hope, a chance at freedom I just couldn't give up. I had dreams, of course. To travel. To go back to school. To have enough savings so a car repair wouldn't send me into a financial spiral. But as I neared my mid-30s, still paying off student loans, those dreams felt more and more out of reach. This was my life. Ordinary, difficult, sometimes lonely. Stable, in its own way. Until that Tuesday. Until that one piece of paper completely upended everything. The day I bought the winning ticket was actually my 30th birthday. I'd just survived another grueling week at work, with Arnold, predictably, taking credit for my latest financial strategy. I stopped at Gus's corner market, just like always, but this time, I decided to splurge. Happy birthday, Cassie. Gus, the kind, older man who owned the store, called out. Thanks, Gus. The usual, please, and maybe one extra for good luck, I replied, handing him $20 instead of my usual $10. Birthday splurge. Gus winked. Maybe today's your lucky day. Instead of a quick pick, I chose my own numbers on a whim. My birth month and day, 3 and 16. My mother's birthday, 12. My father's birthday, 21. Martha's birthday, 9, and Charlotte's birthday, 30. 6 numbers. 6 people who had been, for better or worse, significant in my life. That evening I had takeout, a bottle of wine Charlotte had given me, and settled in for a quiet night. The lottery drawing was at 8 p.m., but I barely paid attention. At 8:30, I lazily picked up my phone, expecting nothing. The first number matched, 3, I smiled faintly. The second, 16. My heart rate picked up, just a bit. The third, 12. The fourth, 21. My palms started sweating. The fifth, 9. I was holding my breath. The sixth and final number, 30. I stared at my phone for what felt like an eternity. No way. This couldn't be right. I checked again. And again. I turned on the TV, rewound to the live drawing. I watched as each of my numbers appeared, one after another. My hands shook so badly I dropped the remote. No way, I whispered to the empty apartment. No way. According to the lottery website, I was the sole winner of $47 million. After taxes, it would be around $28 million. An unfathomable sum for someone who'd been excited about a 10% off coupon for laundry detergent earlier that day. I didn't sleep a wink. I spent hours researching lottery winners. What I found was disturbing. Stories of lives falling apart, families torn by greed, friends and distant relatives appearing out of nowhere. Winners bankrupt within 5 years, more miserable than before. One article called it the quickest path to losing everything you care about. As the sun rose, I made my decision. I would claim the money, but I would tell no one. Not my parents, not my siblings, not even Charlotte. Not right away. I needed time to process this, to make a plan, to understand what this money would mean for my life before everyone else tried to tell me what to do with it. That morning, for the first time in 3 years, I called in sick to work. I made an appointment with Philip Montgomery, an attorney specializing in financial planning. His office was in a downtown high-rise. Sitting in his waiting room, clutching my purse with that winning ticket inside, I felt like a complete imposter. "Miss Wilson." Philip greeted me, extending his hand. He was in his 50s, salt and pepper hair, kind eyes behind expensive glasses. "What can I help you with today?" I took a deep breath and placed the ticket on his desk. "I need to know how to claim this without anyone finding out it was me." His eyes widened briefly, then he nodded professionally. "I see. Well, you've come to the right place." Over the next 2 hours, Philip explained my options. In our state, winners could claim prizes through trusts, keeping their identities private. He outlined setting up a blind trust, how taxes would work, and the importance of a team of financial advisors. The biggest mistake winners make, he told me, is telling too many people too quickly. Once that happens, there's no going back. I nodded, relieved. My instinct had been correct. I want to do this right. I don't want this money to ruin my life. Leaving Philip's office with a folder full of documents, I felt a strange mix of excitement and dread. I had more money than I'd ever dreamed of, yet I couldn't share this life-changing news with anyone. I would be living a double life, pretending to be the same struggling accountant while secretly being a multimillionaire. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked with Philip to establish the trust, claim the winnings, and set up investment accounts. We created a comprehensive financial plan that would ensure I'd never have to worry about money again. The money was real, now sitting in accounts under my control. Yet, my day-to-day life remained unchanged. I still went to work, still complained about bills with coworkers, still drove my old Corolla. The secrecy was starting to weigh on me. I found myself wondering about my family. Would they be happy for me if they knew? Would they respect my boundaries? Or would they see me as nothing more than a walking ATM? The questions haunted me. Slowly, an idea began to form. What if there was a way to find out how my family would react to my newfound wealth without actually revealing it? What if I could test their character before deciding who to share my secret with? The plan crystallized one night as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I would create a scenario where I needed financial help. Not a huge amount, but enough to be significant. I would approach each family member with the same story, the same request, and see who would help me without the prospect of gaining anything in return. Only then would I know who deserved to be part of my new life. The next day, I met with Philip again to ensure my finances were properly secured. "Everything is in order, Cassandra," he assured me. "Your financial future is secure. You could stop working tomorrow if you wanted to." The thought was tempting, but I knew an abrupt lifestyle change would raise questions I wasn't ready to answer. "I think I'll stay at my job for now," I replied. "At least until I figure some things out." That evening, I invited Charlotte over for dinner. As we sat on my small balcony with glasses of wine, I decided to share part of my plan with her. I couldn't keep everything bottled up, and I trusted her more than anyone. "I'm thinking about conducting a sort of experiment with my family," I began carefully. Charlotte raised an eyebrow. "What kind of experiment?" I took a deep breath. "I'm going to tell them I lost my job and need financial help, just to see who actually cares enough to help me when I need it." Charlotte's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "Cassie, that seems manipulative. Why would you do that?" "Because I'm tired of being the only one who helps when others need it," I said, not quite meeting her eyes. "I want to know who would be there for me if the tables were turned." "But lying to test people? That doesn't sound like you." Charlotte set down her wine glass. "Why not just ask them how they feel about you? Have an honest conversation." I laughed, without humor. "Right? Because my family is so great at honest conversations. You know how they are, Charlotte. You've seen how they treat me. Still, this feels wrong." "What are you trying to prove?" "I'm not trying to prove anything," I insisted, though that wasn't entirely true. "I just want to know who actually cares about me versus who sees me as a resource." Charlotte shook her head. "I think you're going to hurt yourself more than anyone else with this. But I know that look in your eye. You've already made up your mind." She was right. I had spent that day crafting my story, making sure it was believable but not so dramatic it would raise suspicion. I would tell everyone that the marketing firm had suddenly shut down after losing its biggest client. I would say I needed $5,000 to cover rent and medical expenses until I found a new position. It was a significant amount, but not outrageous, and certainly not beyond the means of most of my family. I made a list of everyone I would approach: my mother Diane and stepfather Warren, my father Gregory and stepmother Stephanie, my sister Lisa and her husband Paul, my brother Jason, my Aunt Martha, my Aunt Heather, and my cousin Ryan. 10 people, all of whom had turned to me for help at some point. All of whom I had supported, either financially or emotionally. The next day, I practiced my story with Charlotte, who reluctantly agreed to help. "You need to sound genuinely distressed, but not desperate," she advised. "And have specific details ready about the company closing. They might ask questions." I nodded, taking notes. "I'll say the CEO had been embezzling funds, and the company is under investigation. That would explain why it happened so suddenly and why I might not get my final paycheck." "And what about your job search?" "I've been applying everywhere, but the job market is tight, especially for specialized accounting positions. I have some interviews lined up, but nothing definite yet. And my emergency fund is depleted from some recent medical tests." I had thought through every detail, creating a scenario that would elicit sympathy without raising too many questions. As I finalized my plan, I felt a twinge of guilt. Was Charlotte right? Was this manipulative? Was it wrong? But then I remembered all the times I had emptied my savings to help these same people, often at great personal cost. My resolve strengthened. This wasn't just about testing them. It was about protecting myself and my future. I made a prediction list. My mother? Probably offer some help, but less than I needed. My father? Lecture me about financial responsibility, but might send a small amount. Lisa? Claimed she couldn't help due to the kids' expenses. Jason? Definitely say he had no money. Warren and Stephanie? Refuse outright. Aunt Heather? Judge me for my poor life choices. Cousin Ryan? Promise help that would never materialize. The only person I had real hope for was Aunt Martha. Despite having the least to give, she had always been the most generous. But even with her, I tried to keep my expectations low. $5,000 was a lot of money for a public school teacher. The plan was set. Over the next week, I would reach out to each family member individually, tell them the same story, and see who stepped up. Only then would I decide who deserved to know about my lottery win. Only then would I know who truly cared about me, beyond what I could do for them. With a mix of anticipation and dread, I picked up my phone. It was time to find out who my real family was. I decided to call my mother first. Diane always prided herself on being a nurturing parent, often reminding us how she'd sacrificed for her children. If anyone would help, it would be her. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed. She answered on the third ring, sounding distracted. "Hi, Mom," I said, intentionally making my voice sound strained. "Cassie, is everything okay? You sound upset." I launched into my prepared story. The company closing, the lost wages, my precarious financial situation. As I spoke, I could hear her breathing change, growing more concerned with each detail. "Oh, honey, that's terrible," she said when I finished. "Have you applied for unemployment? What about your emergency fund?" I explained that unemployment would take weeks and my emergency fund was gone due to recent medical tests for some concerning symptoms. I didn't specify what they were, letting her imagination fill in the blanks. "I hate to ask this, Mom, but I need help. About $5,000 to cover rent and medical bills until I can find something new. I promise I'll pay you back as soon as I can." There was a long pause. "Oh, Cassie, you know Warren and I just put a down payment on the lake house. We're pretty cash poor right now." Her voice took on a slightly defensive tone. "Have you asked your father? Or Lisa? Paul makes good money at the hospital." I was hoping to avoid asking Dad, I said, truthfully. "And Lisa has the kids and their private school tuition. Well, let me talk to Warren and see what we can do," she said finally. "But I can't promise anything. You know how tight he is with money, especially when it comes to, you know." I did know. Warren had never considered me his responsibility. "Sure, Mom. Just let me know as soon as you can. The rent's due next week." "I will, honey. And I'm so sorry about your job. These things always work out for the best, though. Maybe this is a sign you should look at changing careers to something more stable." After hanging up, I noted her response in a journal I'd started for this purpose. She'd expressed concern, but immediately looked for ways to pass the responsibility to someone else. She hadn't outright refused, but I suspected her conversation with Warren would conveniently result in them being unable to help. The next day, I met my father, Gregory, for coffee. "You look tired," was his greeting as I sat down. I gave him a weak smile and launched into my story. His face remained impassive. When I finished by asking for help with the $5,000, he leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Cassandra, I've always taught you about financial responsibility." He slipped into his teacher voice. "This is exactly why I told you to keep 6 months of expenses saved at all times." "What happened to that plan?" "Life happened, Dad," I replied, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. "Medical bills, car repairs. Not everyone can afford to set aside that much money." He sighed heavily. "And now you expect others to bail you out. What about your spending habits? Do you really need that apartment in that neighborhood? What about your cable subscription and those streaming services?" For the next 20 minutes, he lectured me about financial planning, the job market, and the importance of living below one's means. Not once did he offer any actual help. "I would love to help you, Cassie, but Stephanie and I are focusing on our retirement right now. We can't afford to dip into those funds. It would be financially irresponsible." He patted my hand patronizingly. "This will be a good learning experience for you. Sometimes we need to hit rock bottom before we make necessary changes." I nodded, fighting back tears that were only partly for show. Even expecting this response, it hurt to hear him dismiss my needs so easily. My sister Lisa was next. I drove to her beautiful suburban home. "Cassie, what a surprise," she exclaimed. Her house was immaculate. As we sat in her gourmet kitchen, sipping lattes, I told her about my situation. "Oh my God, that is awful," she gasped, squeezing my hand. "I can't believe they would just close like that. Poor you." Her sympathy seemed genuine, and for a moment, I felt hopeful. Then I mentioned needing to borrow $5,000. "Oh," she said, her expression shifting. "Well, this is actually not a great time. We just bought the new Audi last month and the kids' tuition was due. Plus, we're redoing the master bathroom. She glanced around nervously. Paul handles most of our finances, and he's really strict about our budget. I understand, I said quietly. I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate. I know, she said quickly. Let me talk to Paul and see what we can do. Maybe we can help with a smaller amount. Or maybe you could move in with us temporarily. The guest room is being used for storage, but we could clear it out. I thanked her, explaining moving would be difficult. She promised to call me after speaking with Paul, but the way she avoided eye contact told me all I needed to know. My brother Jason was perhaps the most disappointing. After sending him a detailed text about my situation, he responded with a brief message. That sucks, sis. Really tight right now myself. We'll call you later. He never did. My follow-up messages went unanswered. When I tried calling directly, they went straight to voicemail. This from the same brother who had borrowed thousands from me over the years, always with tearful promises of repayment that never materialized. My stepmother Stephanie was blunt when I called her, not bothering with even a pretense of sympathy. Cassandra, I'm sure this is difficult, but Warren and I are not in a position to help. Perhaps this is an opportunity for you to learn better financial management skills. Have you considered downsizing your apartment or getting a roommate? When I pointed out I had helped them with repairs to their vacation cabin last year, she bristled. That was different. That was a family property that you also enjoy using. The fact that I'd only been invited to the cabin once in 5 years apparently didn't matter. My stepfather Warren was even worse. You are not my daughter, he said plainly. I have supported your mother for years, but your financial problems are your own. Perhaps you should have chosen a more lucrative career path. My cousin Ryan initially seemed sympathetic, promising to definitely help out. He even suggested meeting for lunch to give me a check. But when the day came, he texted an hour before, saying something had come up and he'd reschedule. He never did, eventually stopping responding to my messages altogether. Aunt Heather's response was perhaps the least surprising, but still painful. Well, Cassandra, I always said that company of yours seemed unstable. I told your father you should have taken that job at the bank after college, but no one listens to me. She then proceeded to tell me about all the financial troubles other family members had experienced and how they'd overcome them without begging for handouts. By that evening, I had heard from Lisa that Aunt Heather was telling everyone about my financial irresponsibility. After a week of rejections, half-promises, and outright silence, I was emotionally exhausted. The experiment had confirmed my worst fears about my family. But the reality was still painful to accept. 7 people who had repeatedly asked for and received my help over the years either couldn't or wouldn't return the favor when I needed them. Then my phone rang. It was Aunt Martha. Cassie, honey, I just heard from your mother about the job. Are you okay? Her voice was warm with genuine concern. I hadn't actually reached out to Martha yet, planning to call her the next day. The fact that she had called me first after hearing about my situation secondhand spoke volumes. I'm hanging in there, I said, the emotion in my voice now entirely real. Listen, I want to help. Can we meet for lunch tomorrow? My treat, of course. The next day, we met at a small diner near her apartment. Martha looked exactly as she always did, silver-streaked hair in a simple ponytail, jeans, and a cardigan with mismatched buttons. She hugged me tightly before we sat down. I'm so sorry about your job, sweetheart. That company never deserved you anyway. As we ate, she asked thoughtful questions about my job search and offered to reach out to former colleagues with connections in the business world. Then, after our plates had been cleared, she reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. I want you to take this, she said, sliding it across the table. It's $3,000. I know it's not the full amount you need, but it should help with the rent, at least. I stared at the envelope in shock. Martha, I can't take this. This is too much nonsense. Family helps family. And I want you to know something else. She reached across the table and took my hand. If you need a place to stay to save on rent, my sofa pulls out into a bed. It's not fancy, but you're welcome to stay as long as you need to. Tears filled my eyes, and this time, they were completely genuine. Thank you, I whispered, overwhelmed by her generosity. Now, don't you worry about paying this back right away, she continued. Get back on your feet first. Find a job you actually like this time. Life is too short to work somewhere that doesn't appreciate you. As we left the diner, Martha hugged me again. You are going to be okay, Cassie. You are smart and capable. This is just a bump in the road. Driving home, I clutched the envelope containing $3,000, more money than I knew Martha could comfortably spare. The contrast between her response and the rest of my family's couldn't have been more stark. The only person who had offered genuine help was the one with the least to give. After meeting with Martha, I did some research that left me stunned. $3,000 represented nearly all of her savings. I discovered she had been quietly dealing with complications from type 2 diabetes. Her medication costs had recently increased, and she'd been picking up extra tutoring work to make ends meet. The knowledge hit me like a physical blow. Martha, who had so little, had given me almost everything she had, without hesitation or conditions. Meanwhile, my mother, who had recently spent $8,000 on a bathroom renovation, couldn't spare $5,000 to help her daughter with rent and medical bills. The next day, I invited Martha to my apartment for dinner. As she settled onto my worn couch, I noticed for the first time how tired she looked, the fine lines around her eyes deeper than I remembered. Martha, I need to tell you something, I began, setting a cup of tea in front of her. I haven't been completely honest with you. Her expression remained open, curious rather than concerned. What is it, honey? I didn't lose my job. The company is fine. I still have my position. The words tumbled out quickly. I made up the story, to see who in the family would help me if I needed it. Martha was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. I see. Are you angry with me? I asked, suddenly afraid of losing the one genuine relationship I'd discovered through this experiment. She considered the question. No, not angry. Sad, maybe. Sad that you felt you needed to test people this way. She took a sip of her tea. But I understand why you did it. Our family hasn't always been kind to you. You were the only one who offered to help, I told her. Everyone else had excuses or just ignored me entirely. Martha sighed. People show you who they are when giving becomes inconvenient. I learned that lesson the hard way myself. What do you mean? She set down her cup. My ex-husband, Robert. Did I ever tell you why we really divorced? I shook my head. The family story had always been vague. I came into a small inheritance when my grandmother died, about $50,000. Not a fortune, but significant for us at the time. Robert immediately had all these plans for the money, mainly investing in his friend's business ventures. She smiled ruefully. I wanted to save it for our future, maybe buy a small house eventually. We fought about it for months. One day, I discovered he had forged my signature and withdrawn most of the money. By the time I found out, it was gone, invested in a restaurant that failed within a year. She shook her head at the memory. When I confronted him, do you know what he said? That it was our money, not just mine, and he had as much right to it as I did. As if my name on the inheritance meant nothing. I was shocked. I had no idea. The family preferred the growing apart story, less messy. She reached for my hand. The point is, I learned that some people see you as a resource rather than a person. And it's a painful lesson. I'm so sorry that happened to you, I said, squeezing her hand. It was a long time ago, but it taught me something important about money and relationships. She looked at me intently. Money doesn't just reveal who others truly are, Cassie. It reveals who we are, too. How we use it, how we share it, how we talk about it. It's a powerful mirror. Her words resonated deeply. In that moment, I made a decision. Martha, there's something else I need to tell you. Something big. I took a deep breath. I won the lottery 3 weeks ago. $47 million. Her eyes widened, but she remained silent, waiting. I haven't told anyone else. Not my parents, not Lisa or Jason, not even Charlotte. You're the first to know. Oh, Cassie, she breathed. That is life-changing. I know. And that's why I did this test. I needed to know who would be there for me, without knowing about the money. Martha nodded slowly. I understand that. But what will you do now? That's what I'm trying to figure out. The money is secure, and I have good financial advisors, but I don't know how to handle the family. Martha considered this. You don't owe anyone anything, Cassie. Not even me. But I want to help you, I insisted. Your medical expenses, a better apartment. Whatever you need. She smiled gently. I don't need anything from you, sweetheart. I'm happy with my life. My apartment is small, but it's full of things I love. My car runs most of the time. I have my students and my books, and now this wonderful secret with my favorite niece. She patted my hand. Just knowing you're secure and happy would be enough for me. Her selflessness brought tears to my eyes. Here was someone who had given me almost everything she had when she thought I needed it, and now was asking for nothing in return when she knew I had millions. As we talked late into the night, the contrast between Martha and the rest of my family became even more stark. While I had been conducting my experiment, word had spread through the family about my supposed financial troubles. Instead of prompting concern, it had mainly generated gossip and judgment. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Heard you asked Lisa for money too. You should have told me you were asking everyone. Feels like you're playing us against each other. Another came from my father. Stephanie tells me you've been calling everyone for handouts. This is exactly the kind of irresponsible behavior I warned you about. The family had turned my request for help into evidence of my character flaws, rather than an opportunity to show compassion. And in doing so, they had revealed everything I needed to know about the true nature of our relationships. The morning after my conversation with Martha, I met with Philip to discuss my long-term plans. Now that I had clarity about my family, I could make decisions about my future with open eyes. I want to set up a trust for my Aunt Martha, I told him. Something that will cover her medical expenses and provide her with a comfortable retirement, but in a way that feels like a gift rather than charity. She's very proud. Philip nodded, making notes. We can structure it as a family trust that provides a monthly stipend. She wouldn't have to manage a large sum all at once, which can be overwhelming for someone not used to wealth. Perfect. And I want to buy her a small house near wherever I decide to live. Nothing extravagant, just comfortable and accessible for someone with health issues. We spent the next hour discussing investment strategies, charitable foundations, and my own living situation. I had decided to give notice at my accounting job and focus on establishing a nonprofit organization aimed at helping elderly people living alone, inspired by Martha's situation and the many others like her. What about the rest of your family? Philip asked cautiously. Do you plan to tell them about the winnings? I shook my head. Not right now. Maybe not ever. But I do want to arrange a family meeting to clear the air about my financial troubles. Later that day, I called Charlotte and finally told her the truth about everything, the lottery win and the family experiment. After her initial shock, she understood why I had kept it secret. So what now? She asked. Are you going to become one of those eccentric millionaires who still clips coupons and drives a beat-up car? I laughed. No, but I'm not going to suddenly start buying Bentleys either. I want this money to mean something, to do good. Starting with Martha. She deserves it. Charlotte agreed. And what about everyone else? The ones who failed your test? I'm still figuring that out. I've called a family meeting for this weekend. I told them I have an important announcement. When Sunday arrived, I was surprised to see everyone show up at my apartment. My mother and Warren, my father and Stephanie, Lisa and Paul, even Jason, who had been ignoring my calls for weeks. Aunt Heather arrived with a disapproving frown already in place. Aunt Martha came last, giving me a secret smile as she entered. As everyone settled into my small living room, looking around with varying degrees of curiosity and judgment, I stood before them feeling strangely calm. Thank you all for coming, I began. I know there have been rumors going around about my financial situation, and I wanted to address them directly. My mother shifted uncomfortably. Jason suddenly became very interested in his phone. Lisa and Paul exchanged glances. The truth is, I'm fine. I've found a new job with better pay and benefits. This was technically true, as I had just appointed myself executive director of my new foundation with a modest salary. I'll be transitioning to that position next month. Well, that's wonderful news, my mother said with obvious relief. We've all been so worried. I noticed several faces relax around the room. They had come expecting either to be asked for money again or perhaps to stage some sort of intervention about my financial habits. Instead, they were getting good news that required nothing from them. "So why all the drama about needing money?" my father asked, his tone accusatory. "Why ask everyone for help if you had a job lined up?" I met his gaze steadily. "The job came through recently. And when I was in trouble, I reached out to my family. That's what family is supposed to be for, right?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. "Well, we all have our own financial commitments," Stephanie said defensively. "It's not always possible to help, even when we want to." Of course, I agreed. We all have to make choices about our priorities. I turned to Jason. "Speaking of which, Jason, I noticed you never responded to my messages when I needed help. Yet, you had no problem asking me for $3,000 last Christmas for your rent." He had the grace to look embarrassed. "I was going through some stuff, and I didn't have any money to give you. You didn't even call me back," I pointed out. "That would have been free." The meeting continued in this vein, with me calmly but firmly addressing the hypocrisy and absence of support I had experienced. No one admitted any wrongdoing. There were excuses, justifications, and even some attempts to turn the blame back on me for making everyone feel guilty. As they filed out after an uncomfortable hour, I felt a strange sense of closure. I hadn't told them about the lottery win, but I had stood up for myself in a way I never had before. The money had given me something perhaps more valuable than wealth itself, the courage to see my relationships clearly and to set boundaries accordingly. Martha stayed behind after everyone left, helping me clean up the coffee cups and plates. "You did well," she said quietly. "That couldn't have been easy." "It was actually easier than I expected," I replied. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of disappointing them, because I realized their opinion of me was never based on who I really am. Martha smiled. "That is a powerful realization. So, what happens next?" "Next," I said, "we start looking at houses, for both of us." 1 year later, my life was unrecognizable from the day I had first discovered those matching lottery numbers. I had moved into a beautiful, but modest, home in a quiet neighborhood, with a garden that brought me joy each morning. Just 3 blocks away was Martha's new house, a single-story craftsman with wide doorways to accommodate her walker on the days her diabetes made walking difficult. My nonprofit organization, Second Family, had grown beyond my expectations. We provided companionship, home repairs, and financial assistance to elderly people living alone, with a special focus on those estranged from their families. The work was rewarding in a way my accounting career had never been, and we had already helped over 200 seniors in our city. Charlotte had eventually joined the organization as our outreach coordinator, bringing her nursing expertise and compassionate nature to our mission. She and I still had our weekly wine nights, though now they took place on my comfortable patio rather than in my cramped apartment. My relationship with my family had shifted into something more distant, but also more honest. I maintained occasional contact with most of them, polite birthday calls and holiday gatherings, but the pretense of closeness had fallen away. Without the expectation of emotional intimacy that had never actually existed, our interactions became less painful. None of them knew about my lottery winnings. As far as they were concerned, I had simply found success with my new career in nonprofit management. They seemed to accept this explanation without much curiosity about the details, which told me everything I needed to know about their interest in my life. There had been moments of temptation to reveal the truth, particularly when Jason called asking for money for a new business venture, or when Lisa complained about the cost of her kitchen renovation. But each time, I remembered the silence when I had needed help, and the choice became clear. Interestingly, there had been occasions when family members genuinely needed assistance. When my father had a minor heart attack and faced unexpected medical bills, I anonymously paid them through the hospital's patient assistance fund. When my cousin Ryan finally entered rehab for his gambling addiction, I made an anonymous donation to cover his treatment. They never knew the source of these gifts, and I preferred it that way. Martha and I had dinner together at least twice a week. Her health had improved dramatically with proper medical care and less financial stress. She had retired from teaching but volunteered at a literacy program 3 days a week, still sharing her love of books with children who needed it. You know what still amazes me? She said one evening as we sat on her porch watching the sunset. How differently everything could have turned out if you had announced your lottery win right away. I nodded, considering this alternate reality. The family would have suddenly become very attentive and loving, I imagine. And you would never have known what was real, Martha added. That knowledge, painful as it was, gave you freedom. She was right. The experiment had been painful but illuminating. It had shown me who deserved a place in my life and who did not. It had revealed the true nature of relationships I had spent years trying to strengthen, despite their fundamental imbalance. The greatest lesson I had learned was not about others, but about myself. Before the lottery, I had defined my worth by what I could give to others, constantly trying to earn love through sacrifice and generosity. I had allowed myself to be used because I believed that was what family meant, what love required. Now I understood that real love, the kind Martha had shown me, didn't keep a balance sheet. It gave freely without expectation of return, but it also respected boundaries and dignity. It was honest and consistent, present in good times and bad. I had initially kept my winning secret out of fear, worried that money would corrupt my relationships. What I had not anticipated was how the secret would clarify them, stripping away pretense and revealing truth. The money had not changed who anyone was. It had simply illuminated who they had been all along. My life now was rich in ways that had nothing to do with my bank account. I had purpose through my foundation, genuine connection with Martha and Charlotte, and a hard-won understanding of my own worth that no external validation could shake. Perhaps most importantly, I had peace. The constant anxiety about finances that had been my lifelong companion was gone. But so too was the desperate need for approval from people incapable of giving it. I had built a life aligned with my values, rather than my insecurities. Martha reached over and patted my hand, bringing me back to the present moment. You did good, kiddo. Not just with the money, but with what you learned. I smiled at her, overwhelmed with gratitude for this woman who had shown me what family truly meant. I had a good teacher. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From the shock of those matching numbers, to the pain of rejection, to the joy of creating something meaningful with my unexpected fortune, the money had changed my life, yes, but not in the ways I had initially feared or hoped. It had simply given me the freedom to see clearly and choose wisely. The most valuable thing I had gained had nothing to do with millions in the bank. It was the understanding that the people who deserve a place in your life are not those who are there when you have everything to give, but those who stay when you have nothing to offer but yourself. Have you ever had to test someone's loyalty in your life? What did you learn from that experience? Tell me what you think, I really want to know. Share your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life lessons that might change your perspective. Thank you for listening. Take care.